All right, so it looks like that it started. So today is Saturday morning, about 9:30. We've been chatting for a while, and it is for uh, evening time in the U.S. That's why it's called the U.S. Sangha. But right now, I think that Corey is the only one that's in the U.S. That we have David here, which is he's in Surat Thani in South Thailand, getting ready to do a retreat at Wat Suan Mo. And then Michael here is on the porch, and Pedro is in Italy. So I welcome all of you guys. So Corey had a question about Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. So we'll take today, and well, hello, Scott.
Hello.
Glad that you can join us. We most of us are here in Thailand, so about
Okay.
half of them. So today, Corey has asked about Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, and I'll give enough about his life. First off, he was born in 1906 or 1907 to a mother who was Thai, and his father was Chinese. And they were a merchant family. And Bhikkhu Buddhadasa became a monk early in his life, about the age of 6, because in those days, that was the only education that was available, was becoming a monk. And so it was very common in those days here in Thailand before they had a state-run education. And I also have been in Cambodia where it's true that many kids will ordain as children in order to get an education from the educated monks. Um, at, in one respect, you could say that it's kind of like an orphanage, except that most of the kids that are in that orphanage see their parents every day when they go out on Vendabat. And so Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was in that state, and so was Achan Po. Achan Po became a monk in the early 1920s, and he had stayed in the robes then, and he's 93 now, 94. So it may be in the 19 teens. He became a monk as a child. He's been in the robes since he was 6. But Bhikkhu Buddhadasa disrobed when he was 16 because his father died and they needed him to help with the business. But then when he was age 20, he ordained fully. And he ordained here in South Thailand in the town of Chaya, which is a historical site. Chaya was actually part of the Srijaya Empire of Indonesia at the time, which is also part of the Angkor Wat. And this was in like 700 AD to 900 AD time frame. And so there's a lot of old stupas. Uh, uh, David, when you're in Chaya, there is a museum there, a World Heritage Site that has a lot of artifacts from that time. There's also statues at Wat Suan Mok that were dug up from that time, and there's actually a chetty on the grounds of Wat Suan Mok that dates from that period. So, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa stayed at a Wat pretty close to the beach in Chaya, and then later he went in the 1930s, after being a monk for about 10 years or so, he went to study Pali in the universities that they have in Bangkok. And Thailand has a rather extensive program of teaching Pali language that can go, I think, 9 years of Pali studies. Well, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was in that Pali studies for a number of years and started arguing with the teachers about the meaning and definitions of some of the Pali words, that he did his own research. And then later, he was invited to give a public talk, and I think that it was a graduation ceremony for a bunch of nurses. It was at a nursing school, but I may be confused. That may have been later that he was giving the graduation ceremony. But someone in the audience did not like what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was having to say because they were ordinary minded. And Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was teaching the real Dhamma, and that it caused a stir in Bangkok. Now, in Bangkok, around the royal palace, there are a number of really big, fancy temples. Many of them were founded about 100 years ago, but even more were really ancient. And so they have a tradition in Bangkok of a king of the Sangha, which is actually called the Sangharaj, and another word for it is Samdet. So the Samdet Sangharaj of Thailand was part of the Sangha that tried Bhikkhu Buddhadasa for heresy because of his talk that he gave. And that a Sangha is 20 monks, and they don't have them very often, and so they always get really, really senior monks to be part of that tribunal. Now, what a Sangha actually means is a breaking of the Sangha. A Sangha means that someone is trying to bust up the Sangha, trying to cause divisions and problems within the Sangha. Well, on this group of monks of 20 of them, there were some who were in agreement with him and some who were in disagreement with him. You could say then, in fact, that he was quite lucky to have a group of nobles who were actually monks who understood the teaching of the Buddha correctly, but it's always been kind of secret, underground. The real teachings of the Buddha have never been made public until Bhikkhu Buddhadasa came along. I think that tradition of keeping the real teaching of the Buddha secret happened in India because of you could call them pogroms. You could that the Brahmins were always against the teachings of the Buddha, but when the Muslims, the Mughals, came in from Turkey, the Brahmins convinced the Islam that the Buddhist teaching was their biggest enemy. And so for about 200 or so years, Buddhism was wiped out almost completely in India. They went so far as to even dig up the Bodhi tree down to the roots. Everything was destroyed. There was a University of Nalanda, and so the monks, they didn't all get killed, though there was about 100 million people who were killed during this time, but a lot of the monks disrobed and hid in society, and a whole lot of other monks started traveling. And so this was the time frame when the Theravada Buddhism, that came and spread again all over Southeast Asia, into China, etc., even into Japan. This is the time frame when the Japanese islands were, let us say, invaded by the teachings of the Buddha. And so the real teachings of the Buddha then became kind of secret, leaving the magical part open and around, and the open part then had magical powers and rebirth and all of those kind of teachings, as well as the one teaching of that it's hard to become enlightened. Well, actually, it's true that it is very difficult to become enlightened when you believe in magic, because you're hoping or expecting something magical to happen to you, and then you're enlightened. So, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa then was teaching the real teaching of the Buddha, and he doing it publicly, and got into trouble for that. So, in this, going back to that point about the Sangha, there were a number of issues that came up there, and that all of the Pali schools started researching what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was saying, and they could not prove him wrong. That what the teachings of the Buddha actually teach was not what had become commonly thought to be part of the Pali Canon. One of the issues that was raised was Bhikkhu Buddhadasa would say that only anapanasati is what the Buddha taught. He did not teach 40 kinds of meditation. Now, the 40 kinds of meditation are actually in the Visuddhimagga, and that what they did is they listed a bunch of practices. And so in that 40 meditations, you'll find 10 meditations of the charnel ground. You'll have the 4 Brahma Viharas, you'll have the 4 jhanas, and you'll have other things like that in the 40. Also the Kasina meditations, looking at a clay disc, or they would take leaves and stitch them together with sticks. And that this is what gave rise to what's called the blue Kasina, which actually is not blue at all, because in the Pali language, blue and green are the same colors. And so a green Kasina would be new leaves. A yellow Kasina would be aging leaves, and a brown Kasina would be old leaves, which would be the same color as a mud pie. And so this is all of those 40 meditations that they had collected, but the Buddha only taught one meditation, which was the anapanasati. And this caused the stir, because they had been referencing newer literature, and Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was part of taking them back to the original teachings in the suttas, which would be before the time of King Asok. And so around Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, there was a new movement started called Anti-Asok, which meant the time before King Asok, which happened about 100 to 150 years after the death of the Buddha. And so this was the time that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa actually became a public figure in Bangkok. But after that trial, he was exonerated, almost. What he was actually finally accused of, or actually sentenced with, was teaching the right, correct Dhamma to the wrong people. Imagine that. This happened in the 1930s. He was teaching the correct, right Dhamma to the wrong people. Well, who would be the wrong people? The wrong people who already had a bunch of beliefs about what the Buddha taught, rather than asking about it. That in the old days, that someone would be taught the real correct teaching of the Buddha only in a particular set of circumstances. And that is, 1, the student would start asking the right questions, to 2, the right teacher who knew the right answers at the right time. So if you're asking the right questions to the right teacher at the right time, you will then be allowed into the noble teachings of the Buddha. Well, guess what? Bhikkhu Buddhadasa then said, this is the 20th century. It's time to change that tradition. It's no longer dangerous to teach the open teaching of the Buddha. Now, let us see where it actually is dangerous to teach the teachings of the Buddha. One is that if it's taught incorrectly, then people will fall into wrong view. Now, what I mean by that is that there is a noble right view that we'll talk about in a moment, but then there is a wrong view, and then there is an ordinary right view. And the ordinary right view is what is taught in ordinary Buddhism. The mundane Buddhism teaches ordinary right view. Now, that ordinary right view, what that means is that uh, you cannot get away with it. There's a karma machine out there who will eventually get you if you mess up. In other words, we have a whole lot of stuff around that right view, ordinary right view, which means that we've got moms and dads. We have this world and the other worlds. We have monks and saints who have visited that other world and know for sure that it exists, and all of this kind of stuff. To where wrong view is known as uh, mom and dads don't matter, that there is no other worlds, there is only this one, and basically you can get away with it. Whatever you do wrong, there will, if you get away with it immediately, then you'll get away with it long term, rather than recognizing that eventually you're going to get caught at it. So this is the difference, and both of these are ordinary. You could go so far as to say that progressives have the wrong view, that they can go build, they can build highways, they can have social programs, and those things won't cost anything. We can get away with it. And the Republicans are conservative. They say, oh no, everything costs too much money. We can't do anything. We got to keep what we've got. So those two views, or those two ordinary views, is what the Buddha taught against. He says, no, everything needs to be looked at as right here, right now. And this is the path to enlightenment. In fact, if you can see things the way that they are right here, right now, and deal with that, that is enlightenment right here, right now. But the ordinary mind state has to do with things are off into the future, that you've got to pray to a God, or you've got to get relief or mercy or forgiveness or a pardon, or you've got to get magical power, or you can do some, let us say, merit making for the future life. And so this is the ordinary way of looking at it, and this is the way, if you'll notice, every religion that you've probably ever heard of, from Hindu, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, all of them have a method or procedure so that someday off into the future you can get free. And this is also part of ordinary Buddhism, but ordinary Buddhism actually existed only because people, when they would come to the teachings of the Buddha, they brought all of their old ideas from their old religions. And that baggage started piling up, so that the actual teachings of the Buddha became more obscure. And so when Bhikkhu Buddhadasa got to Bangkok and started teaching the real teachings of the Buddha, it caused quite a stir. But he was really, really lucky in the sense that some of those senior monks really knew that he was teaching correctly. That's why it was eventually brought out that he was teaching the right Dhamma to the wrong people. Well, one of those men who understood that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was teaching the right stuff happened to have been the Sumdet Sangharaj of Thailand, the very head monk of the entire country. And he eventually became Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's teacher. And so they had a lot of communications back and forth between them during those years. His name, by the way, was Achan Bhikkhu Buddhadasa Jarn. Everybody might know who Bhikkhu Buddhadasa is. And Bhikkhu Buddhadasa Jarn was actually noble, and he was the Sumdat. Now, there's a very strong indication that the royal family of Thailand had been, let us say, in contact with the actual noble Dhamma of the Buddha. And that there was a monk by the name of Wecha who was born in 1860 to King Mongut, and he was a brother of Chulalongkorn. Now, Chulalongkorn became the king, but Chulalongkorn supported Wecharn to reestablish Buddhism in Thailand. This was the beginning of the Dhamma movement, and many of the Wats around Bangkok were established during those times. And then in 1916, Wicharn became the regent or the king of Thailand because Chulalongkorn died and his son was not old enough to assume the kingly responsibilities. So this monk, Wicharn, disrobed in 1916 and was regent. He finally died in 1920. But while he was still a high noble monk, he made Bhikkhu Buddhadasa the Samdet Sangharaj. So this is a lot of old history that shows that the noble teachings of the Buddha did not originate or be reestablished by Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. It was already very old. It had been part of the Thai tradition, but it had been kept kind of secret. And that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was not the one who invented the cat in the bag. He was the one who let the cat out of the bag. So, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, Ajahn Bhikkhu Buddhadasa continued. He left Bangkok and came back to Chaya, and eventually his family got up enough money to buy the property that is now currently Wat Suan Mok. And that before Buddha Gosajarn died, he actually came down to visit Bhikkhu Buddhadasa at Wat Suan Mok. I think this was like 1940s, something like that. And so this is the early story of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa and how he became kind of famous in the early days. And so we also know that he had connections with the king, that in the 1960s, the king of Thailand actually, no, wait a minute, no, it was when I was there, it was in the 1980s that the king of Thailand came to Wat Suan Mok to dig a well. Before that, they had big receptacles to keep rainwater. Well, anybody who's been in South Thailand knows that once a year you get so much rain that they would fill up those receptacles. But the king came down and put in a very, very big, heavy-duty, deep well at Wat Suan Mok, and they would use the pump to pump in and replenish the water, so that now they have a lot of water. We also know that the king of Thailand offered Bhikkhu Buddhadasa his helicopter when Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was very close to death and was getting really, really sick. The king of Thailand offered to bring the helicopter down to pick Bhikkhu Buddhadasa up and take him to Bangkok. And Bhikkhu Buddhadasa refused that. There's some other things like this, is that in Thailand they have what is called a Chao Kun organization. There's about 300 to 500 monks that are part of this. You could think of them as the cardinalship of the Theravada Buddhism in Thailand, and that this is an honor that is given to certain monks that they've aged and become very important teachers and whatnot, and so they're designated as the Chao Kun. And Bhikkhu Buddhadasa actually refused that honor from the king. Now, on a side note, we now have three Westerners, Ajahn Sumedho, Ajahn Amaro, and Ajahn Pasano, who are part of Ajahn Chah's lineage, that it looks like, because of their name change, have been designated as Chao Kun. And I think that's quite remarkable that Ajahn Sumedho and his group from Ajahn Chah's lineage has that much clout in Thailand. And that part of that designation is that when somebody is named Chao Kun, they get the honorific title they're called Lung Po. There's also the story then that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa named his dog Luang Po, and a lot of people became upset. I guess when Bhikkhu Buddhadasa became a Luang Po, instead of keeping the honor for himself, he gave it to the dog. So let's talk about then what is the actual noble teachings that the Buddha gave. The noble teaching is that it's not something off into the future, that you become enlightened right here, right now, as soon as you clean out your mind and have noble thoughts. That the noble thoughts that you have right now makes you a noble. And when you have ugly thoughts, then you lose that nobility. And so the whole practice of Anapanasati, as well as the Eightfold Noble Path, which is actually, this is the real teaching of the Buddha. It goes like this, that the Buddha was known to have said in at least 4 different suttas that he teaches only one thing, and that is dukkha, dukkha nirodha. When you have dukkha, you're an ordinary person. You have magical thoughts, you want power, you want glory, you want religion, you want to be saved, you want something that you don't have. And when you are satisfied with the way things are right now, that's dukkha nirodha, when you come out of it. The second noble truth is that this dukkha, this dissatisfaction that we have, is caused mostly by ignorance, and because of that, we want things ignorantly, and we want to get rid of things ignorantly. Now, wanting, lust, and ill will are basically the same thing, just looking at it from the perspective. For instance, if you want something, if you like something and then you want it, if you want it, that means that you are dissatisfied with being without it. And so you'll feel better when you do get it, except that that's going to be temporary. Or if you want to get rid of something, let us say that there's a monk that keeps bothering you, you want to get rid of him. So ill will and greed are basically 2 sides of the same coin, and we live in this duality of liking things and not liking things. We do it ignorantly. And when we can come out of our ignorance and our wants to see things the way that they really are right here, right now, then you are free right here, right now. This is the real teaching of the Buddha. And that the third noble truth is when you do come out of it and you feel really good, you're free right here, right now, and there is a method for that. And that method is the Eightfold Noble Method. It's translated into English as a path, and that leads us then to believe that it is a path that we have to tread, that there's a destination to get to. The fact is that when you are actually out on that path, practicing that path or practicing it, you're enlightened right then and there. But if you want to get someplace, then you're not practicing correctly. That in fact, what you do is you begin to enjoy the steps that you're taking, the walking that you're doing, the learning, the skill development that you're having right now. That's liberating when you enjoy it as it is right here, right now. And that's the real teaching of the Buddha. This is the Eightfold Noble Path, and it has these qualities. Number 1, wake up, which means come into the present moment. This Pali word is sati. It's translated into English as mindfulness, but mindfulness has different qualities in English than the word sati has, which is basically, let us say, being drenched with cold water. You wake up, and wake up to the fact that you're wanting something, or you're wanting to get rid of something, that you're making plans, that things right now are not good enough, and then we can change that. This is the real point, is that the teaching of the Buddha and what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa brought back to it is that this is a change model. You change right now. You don't hope that something's going to change you in the future. You make that change right here, right now. If you see that you're carrying something heavy, set it down right here, right now, and you lighten up. You're free from it right here, right now. This is what the Buddha taught, and this is what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa let out into the public, that your salvation is immediately. Now, the likelihood of you picking something back up and carrying it around again is quite high. But as soon as you recognize that that thing that you're carrying is heavy, you can set it right back down. And pretty soon you start picking up fewer and fewer things, and you keep them shorter and shorter times until you find that you don't pick up much of anything at all, and you don't carry much stuff around. And there's various stages along the way like that. But remember this, that when you set things down right now, you're free from that burden right here, right now. So let's look at magical powers for a moment. People want magical powers so that they can feel good, they can control other people, they can get what they want if they have magical powers. But the real magical power is not wanting anything, that you're already satisfied. You don't need other kinds of powers in order to hurt people or get from them what you want, because you don't want anything. That's the real teaching of the Buddha, is to become really satisfied with how things are right here, right now. You set down those things that are burdensome, and you're free right here immediately. And so the method that we practice this Eightfold Noble Path or Eightfold Noble Method is through the practice of Anapanasati. And what Anapanasati is in fact, the four foundations of sati is actually part of really old teachings that predate the Buddha. That in fact, Greek mythology and the ancient Greeks had this method, and so did the Indians in India. It's actually what they call the four elements, things that are really elementary, things that are solid, things that are liquid, things that are air or gases, and things that are energetic or fire. And so these are the four primary elements. Now we, in modern physics, have what, 92 or 93, and they're still counting. Maybe they can make some more. But all of them have these four qualities, and it has to do with the temperature. The temperature means that when things are cool, they're solid. When they get a little bit warm, they're liquid. When they get even hotter, they become air. And when they get really hot, they become a plasma. So the Buddha took this old method and brought it into the point that our being, each one of us, has the following four elements. We have a body, we have our emotions and feelings and likes and dislikes, we have a mind that has various mind states, from being a victim to being a winner, from being dull to being bright, from all these various states of mind that we have. And then in the mind state, we will have a mind's object, our thoughts, our ideas, our concepts, our views. And these are the way that we look at it in ordinary life. But in the noble life, what we see then, in fact, that the mind can change. Our feelings can change. The body changes. And then, in fact, our mind really is fast. That things will come up in the mind and then change immediately. They rot away. They fall apart. And so what we can do is just let that stuff go. The body is slow, but it changes. We can't do anything about it except just accept that it's getting old. Our feelings are back and forth, up and down. And we can recognize that if we just let our feelings go, we wind up being satisfied with the way that we feel. Now, this is almost completely antithetical to the way that most religions are taught. They teach that you're supposed to think a particular way, and you're supposed to behave a particular way, and you're supposed to think a particular way. There's rules here, you know. But with the real teaching of the Buddha, the reality is that it has to be with whether you're satisfied or not. And if you are satisfied, then you're unlikely to harm someone. If you're satisfied, it's unlikely that you're going to tell lies. If you're satisfied and completely okay the way things are, you're unlikely to steal or take anything. And this is the real teaching of the Buddha, is to come out of our dissatisfactions by making a change, to see that we don't like it, and then do. So, this is the teaching of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, and we can see over a long period of time that he went through some changes himself. That back in the old days, and still in Burma, and for sure in Sri Lanka, there's a lot of Buddhist seniors, monks, all of them that are very, very much in love with newer teachings like the Visuddhimagga. And so even as Bhikkhu Buddhadasa became noble, he would still hold to the teachings of the Visuddhimagga. And he would still teach things that he had learned from the Visuddhimagga, but over time he moved away further and further from it. That at one time he would say that 95% of what's in the Visuddhimagga is correct. And then many years later, he would say, Buddhism would be better off if we just burned the darn thing, throw it in the ocean. The same way was his attitude about the Abhidhamma, was that at one time it was great, and then it's got some problems, but eventually he came to the point of, let's throw that stuff out, that the real teachings of the Buddha can be found within the Pali Canon, the oldest literature. The Udana, the Sutta Nipata, the Majjhima Nikaya, all of that stuff was what was there by the time that the Buddha died. And then the Angara Nikaya, the Samyutta Nikaya, and the Dinga Nikaya all came much later. And so that stuff is not necessarily as valuable as the stuff that happened immediately upon his death or while he was still alive. And so this is what we mean by anti-asok, was actually the literature that came from the time of the Buddha is much more likely to be noble, and the stuff that came later is much more likely to be ordinary. So, Corey, do you have any questions about Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's life?
I was reading one of his books. I think it was like something about society. It was about his idea for a better society. Do you remember that?
Dhammic Socialism.
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought that was a great book. I didn't read all of it yet. I'm about halfway through, but I thought it was great. And I feel like he must have told you about some of that and kind of passed the torch to you or something. Was that, or maybe I didn't really think so much. I thought it was a possibility, but did he ever talk to you about his vision or his ideas and encourage you to kind of push things forward?
Actually, yes, but not so much. I mean, I really, really appreciate the time that I spent personally with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. We talked about a lot of different stuff. But most of that I know from that one particular book, it's got a story behind it that I think you might appreciate. All right. This book came out during the time of the Vietnam War. We called it Vietnamese War here in the U.S., but in Asia, it's called the American War. I wonder why they give them those names. So, there was an idea that they had in America called the domino effect, and it was true. That when communism would come in, they would actually, the communism would infiltrate the same way that Islam came in. In other words, you come in, you're either with us or you're dead. Those are your two choices. You're either with us or you're dead. And so there were various movements, one of which was in Thailand. There was a group of rebels in the Northeast that actually was part of the Laotian. And you know, eventually that Laos was taken over by the Vietnamese government. But during those times, um, there was some conflict so that the rebels in the northeast part of Thailand wanted to overthrow the Thai government. There was something really weird about it, though, and that is that they took Bhikkhu Buddhadasa as their mascot. They had a newspaper, and he would be featured on their newspaper. They would have photos of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa in the rebel group, and also they were very favorite book that they had was his book on Dhammic socialism. Well, the CIA got wind of this book, and they got wind of what. See, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was in South Thailand. He didn't have anything to do with that group, but there was a monk who confessed at Wat Suan Mok during the Patty Mok. He confessed that he came from Bangkok and was, let us say, recruited by the CIA to come to South Thailand to investigate and spy on Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. And when this monk got there, he found out for himself that he was sent on a wild goose chase, that it was wrong for the CIA to have anything to say about Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. And so he confessed that he had been sent there by the CIA to investigate Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. Now, in that book on the Dhammic socialism, there is a point that almost everyone that I know, even students who come and understand the noble teaching, they say that what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa said in this case is wrong. And this is what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa taught, is that what they do in Thailand, the marriage stuff, is generally taken care of by the grandmothers. That the mother of the bride and the mother of the prospective husband will become friends. They'll look at the situation to see if the kids will match up together, and then the marriage is arranged. And Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was actually for then arranged marriage. What he would say is that kids who are 18, 20 years old, they make their choices based upon their feelings, based upon their liking and not liking. Boyfriend and girlfriend meet up with each other, they like each other, and that's it. But those marriages often don't last. That, in fact, look at the divorce rate in the United States, you'll find that the divorce rate is higher than 50%, which means that romantic love doesn't work too well. But Bhikkhu Buddhadasa would recommend that the parents, the moms and dads on both sides, will make a logical decision. They'll check things out to see is this boy and this girl suitable? Will they fit together? Will they be able to make these families unified and have the family grow and be prosperous? In the old days, the dowry was set so that the boy's family and the girl's family equally contributed money in gold and in land, so that if the husband died, the family would be taken care of. That tradition still holds, but is deteriorated into automobiles, televisions, motorbikes, and that kind of stuff is what they have as part of the dowry. But oftentimes gold and land will be part of the situation. Now, another point about that is that the fathers, the two father-in-laws and the two mother-in-laws, especially the two mother-in-laws, will become great friends. They will join and merge their families together to where in the West, the two mother-in-laws may never even meet each other. Or if they do, it's at the wedding, and then they don't have anything to do with each other. But in Thailand, they have those arranged marriages, and that the parents are then deeply involved with that relationship between the boy and the girl. I'm hoping I'm describing it correctly for you so you can see the value of that, because mostly Westerners, they like the idea of romantic relationships. What do you think about that, Corey? Because that's in the book. Have you actually read that yet?
I'm not sure that I have yet. I'm about halfway through it. But, if you don't have like social support networks or insurances or a lot of the things that we have, that system basically ensures that your family isn't going to splinter as a result of catastrophe. So, I could see why it's important to have things that way. And I could also see why, people are kind of doing it less, or why America has chosen a different way. I wouldn't really say America's way is better, but, I could see the benefit of both. And my experience of love is that generally you could make it work with somebody. And, like over time, the more you do things together, you build the bond. It's not like you have to start with good chemistry and romance. Like you could have a logical match and then grow to love them over time and make it work. And so I could definitely see why, they see the reason and the strength in doing it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like before, for the last 4,000 to 6,000 years, maybe the last 100 or 200 years, we've kind of had all these developments and can do things differently. But for 5,000 years, having the parents make the logical choice was the strong way to basically keep your family strong, your country strong, your community strong. It's just kind of like, it's a big picture thinking about everything.
Right, through relationships. That's where the strength comes. Strength does not come because one guy has a big army. The strength comes because the guys who join the army are family together. So, going on that point, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa is not all of that keen on democracy, which is part of the book that you're reading. All right. What has happened with democracy means that there is going to be automatically, because of the system, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be this group against that group, and they're together are going to be against another group. And you can see that democracy in the U.S. has always been a matter of conflict, and they're either fighting with each other. The Republicans and Democrats are fighting with each other, or they're together fighting somebody else. And the U.S. has been at war all of this time, where the number of wars that have been happening in Thailand are very, very few. Two of the most remarkable ones would be when the British invaded Thailand, the Thais just let them come in. And then when the Opium War started, the British couldn't send a lot of ships from England, and so they withdrew from Thailand to go fight those wars. And when they did, the Thais put all the British on those ships, all the merchants and all the people who had established in Thailand, all the British, they were put on that last ship and say, "You guys leave." The same thing happened with the Second World War. Japan invaded Thailand, and the Thais just let them come in. In fact, the U.S. government was wrong when they thought that the Thais had sided up with the Japanese. But in fact, because the Japanese invaded Thailand and it was such an easy job, they didn't maintain a large force here. And so what happened, they were building a railroad to Burma. And when they were building the road, this is a very famous story about the bridge of River Kwai in Kanchanaburi, and the British, I think, came in and bombed the roads, the railroad. But the Thais are the ones who really took care of it, because they planned it correctly so that the steel that they were putting in was in Bangkok, but the trains that were taking it up to the rail where they were building it, they separated that, and then the Thai people went and stole all the rail that they had already put in, isolating the rail and all of that from Bangkok. They couldn't get back. They actually started to starve to death because the Thai people wouldn't feed the Japanese. Well, the Japanese actually had a lot of prisoners of war from Singapore, a lot of Australians, a lot of British. And so there's huge cemeteries up in Kanchanaburi where all of the prisoners of war died because of starvation. But really, that's the way that the Thais have always operated, sneaky. Thai people are really, really sneaky. They do things underground, underhanded, and they also cooperate together. Now, back to the book about from Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's Dhammic Socialism. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa recommends that a best form of government, if you have to have a government, the best form of government is a benign dictatorship. What do we mean by a benign dictatorship? It means that the dictator is more interested in just sitting around and having a good life and not bothering the people. And that's basically what the Thai government has been mostly. There have been some incidents where the kings or whatever get greedy, and then the people will protest. But other than that, Thai government is kind of a benign government in the sense that it doesn't bother to tax the people much. They have a VAT, but you've got to have a big company before you get VAT. That ordinary people don't pay any taxes in Thailand. And yet, on my recent trip to Bangkok, I could see that the Thai government has done something right in Bangkok because they've got a huge transportation network. They've got freeways all over the place. They've got high-rise buildings. They've got a good taxi system. Whatever's happening in Bangkok is working. And yet the government doesn't do very much. It's benign. And yet look at the U.S. Their government is constantly fighting amongst themselves. The rich and the poor are at odds. They don't keep track of their infrastructure. Things are falling apart, and things are a mess because people are fighting with each other over government. And yet Bhikkhu Buddhadasa recommends, why don't we just have a benign dictatorship? In a way, you could say that what we need to do is to give Donald Trump absolutely everything he wants, and then he'll stop bothering people.
I don't know if Donald Trump is the dictator I'd want.
Well, that's the whole point. You don't want you don't want anyone to be a dictator. You want to have your own voice in government, and when everybody is screaming at the top of their lungs, you've got chaos. The reason why Donald Trump would be such a bad dictator is because they've given him so much flack. If they'd have just gone along with whatever he wanted, we probably would be much better off. But it's always this issue of conflict. How can we take the conflict out of government? How can we get people disinterested in government? People don't bother to vote much here in Thailand because what's they going to vote for? The only thing, there's only real reason to vote is when you've got people you don't like. But if everybody in government is likable and things are happening on their own, then you don't need to be all that interested in government. So in this regard, what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa put in that book on Dhammic Socialism turns out to be correct, with the two examples of the U.S. and Thailand. That a benign dictatorship is possibly the easiest form. So, would you rather, Corey, would you rather have a government that you never hear from, but good things are happening? Or would you rather have turmoil and the news constantly barking about this team or this party or that party, and keeping things bleeding? Think about it.
I'd rather have peace. Yeah.
Pardon?
I would rather have peace and benign or benevolent dictatorship, but in order for that to happen, the society at large has to be ready for it. Because if they just get control when they have these bad habits, it might turn into chaos. And so transitioning to that, would be really good.
So what we need then to help the U.S. come to that benign state is the teachings of the Buddha, just like Thailand has had the teachings of the Buddha for centuries now. It may be the ordinary kind, but it still has these kind of qualities with it. That ordinary Buddhism is certainly a whole lot better than angry Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Let everything be benign. Let everything be easygoing. That when you see the problems, just let it go. It's not a problem. The only real problems that ever happened were in people's minds. And when people stop having mental problems, then they no longer have problems in their life. It's only when you want things to be different. When you don't like Donald Trump, that's your problem. And it's because a whole lot of people don't like Donald Trump that Donald Trump is such a monster. He was a monster because he was created as a monster. And if we just give him everything that he wants, I mean, all he really does want is a Diet Coke and a diaper and to be left alone. That's really all. And if we would give Donald Trump all that he wanted, you know, kind of lie to him. He wants to ban Muslims. Okay, the Muslims are banned. You'll never hear from them again. And then they don't change the laws. Just give him what he wants and everything would be happy. So that's the real issue, is that we create conflict by making people at odds with each other in a democracy. But a much better form of government for everyone, every government in the world would be better off if they didn't have dictators who wanted things. Hitler wanted to take over the world. I think Putin wants to take over the world. Well, why do they want to take over the world? Why can't they just sit in their palace and be happy? That's the way of looking at it. This is why you need the Buddhism to come first, so that people can become satisfied and easygoing, and they can become satisfied and easygoing in an ordinary way, and then they can become easy and satisfied in a noble way. And this is the way that Buddhism will take over the world, but it's taking over the world by taking the conflict out of the world. And this is what that book on Dhammic socialism is all about. But I tell you what, the CIA, when they heard the word socialism, they did not hear the word Dhamma. They only heard socialism. And boy, they get angry. And they send spies.
Wow.
But if you look at the word socialism, what does that mean? Let's have a society. Let's be social with one another. Socialism doesn't mean the government owns everything. What real socialism means is the government doesn't do anything. It just sits around kind of doing nothing and everybody's happy. So, Michael, do you have anything to say about this?
Yeah, the government just needs to learn there's nothing to do.
Mm-hmm. The government learns there's nothing to do and there's no place to go and there's no reason to hassle people and everything is cool.
Sounds chill with me.
Yeah, just chill, baby, chill. How about you, Michael? I mean, Daniel? David, rather. Hard to see the screen. David, what do you think?
So you think that Thailand is still 95% ordinary Buddhism, yeah?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, I don't have a survey, and you know what are surveys. They call people on the phone, and most Thai people don't have phones.
Yeah.
So it's a guess. I don't know for sure, but I do know this. The likelihood of finding nobles is much higher in Thailand than in the general population of the U.S. That the U.S. society is designed around getting more and more, getting more money, getting more greed, getting more power, getting more everything, which means everybody is dissatisfied. Where Thailand more or less hangs out and does the job and everything is all right. To chill, baby, just chill out. Then, in fact, I noticed that at the Luang Praya station, They're in Chumphon. That this guy was so obviously a poofter. It was beautiful. This guy was dressed in makeup and he was everything, but he kept telling the crowd to just chill out. We'll have room for everybody on the boat. There's no reason to rush. And yet all of these Westerners were in there, about 600 people in this place. And they were all really worried, uptight, trying to get in line and all of that. And a few of us were just sitting back and hanging out. We knew that we would get on the boat. There's no reason to rush or anything. That's the Thai style. It's just hang out. Everything's going to be all right. There's room for everybody on the boat. Very socialist. Where I imagine in the West, they'd say, all right, everybody get in line. Time to go. Hurry up and wait. So, Pedro, what's happening with you? Nothing much. He's hanging out. All right. So, does anybody have any last comments? Corey, do you have any last questions or anything to say?
I'm good.
All right. Well, let's finish the call now. We'll see you guys later. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. David, did you get your questions answered also about the difference between the noble and the ordinary? That Buddhism has an amazing effect even on ordinary people. They're still greedy, but they're not so much.
Mm-hmm. It's though Thailand still mostly ordinary people have ordinary Buddhism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the Thai people are more sabai than American people. Like they're more relaxed, easygoing. But most Thai people have the idea that Nibbana is something far off in the future that maybe they will never get to in this lifetime.
And yet many of them are already there. They're already sabai.
Yeah, but they don't realize it.
So that's an important point is that, there's something off into the future, but who knows what it is? It's not important. Can we be okay right now while we're waiting?
Right. Yeah, Thai people are okay with that. But I think the Western, like Dhamma dude, he always thinks that dukkha, the end of dukkha is far off in the future. So he's like anxious to reach that.
All right. Well, I've enjoyed this call. Thanks for asking, David.
Okay. Thank you for answering.
We'll see you soon because I know you're over at Watsuan Mok. It would be great if you could find out what's happening at Dom Kiem.
Yeah, I'll check it out after the retreat. Yeah.
Excellent. All right.
I was just curious. Are you paying for the Watsuan Mok retreat? Is it free?
The retreat is not free.
It's 2,000 baht years ago. I imagine it's still 2,000 baht, and that's just for the food.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. 2,000 baht for 10 days, that's 200 baht a day. That's like $8 or so. And you can't probably live on the street for 800 baht a day, or $8 a day. Okay. The Dhamma is free.
The Dhamma is free.
Mm-hmm.
You're just paying for the food and whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Upkeep of the place.
All right. Well, we'll see you.
Okay, see you.